A couple of weeks ago I posted a video on my channel here to talk about the issue I was having with YouTube/Google in terms of them withholding money that I had earned on their platform for some 5 months. And the reason for that was that there was a verification code that had been mailed to me here in Mexico that I never received. And I repeated that process 4 times. I gave YouTube an option to send it to me by courier. They refused to do that, and many of you on this channel reached out, supported me, had my back, and I just want to say that I'm fully appreciative of that and very, very grateful to you all, to all those people that reached out to give me some level of support. The issue has been resolved with YouTube. I haven't received the PIN. I actually found another workaround, and I have actually received the money now. So I wanted to show my gratitude to you all today for reaching out and offering me your support when I had this issue with YouTube and Google. And I just want to say also that the issue hasn't ended there. Unfortunately, due to me going public and sharing my truth not only with you here on YouTube but on a number of other platforms in the business world, YouTube and Google have decided to punish me, and they've stopped showing my videos to the masses. So if you look at the numbers of views of my videos, they've taken a huge dive, particularly from the day that I put these complaints out, and there's a bit of retribution going on. But listen, I'm not going to let that deter me. I'm here because I'm passionate about rugby. I'm going to keep making videos about rugby across the world, and we're going to move forward. But I did want to share that information with you all today. So anything you can do to help me get those numbers back up again, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, give the videos a thumbs up, all that stuff that plays into the YouTube algorithm. Let's see if we can beat them at their own game and take them on. Okay, let's move on and talk about some rugby. G'day and welcome to Inside Rugby with Mark. My name is Mark and I'm a Kiwi rugby fan living here in beautiful Cancun in Mexico. If you haven't been here before, welcome. It's great to have you here. Stick around. There's plenty of exciting rugby related content coming up on my channel. Now, if you are a regular visitor to my channel, thanks for your support. Got some big news for everybody today. We're heading into a new process here on my channel. Starting this coming week, I'm going to be doing lots of interviews of rugby folks around the world. We're going to be talking to young players who are going to be the next generation of superstars in the game of rugby. We're going to be talking to administrators and putting all those difficult questions to them that you wrote in your comments to me during the Rugby World Cup. I'm going to be talking to players that have played in the United States who are now working in an administration, and there's going to be a host of really interesting dialogue going on my channel in the future starting this coming week. So make sure you hit the subscribe button, stick around for all of that, because we're going to get to the bottom of what's going on in rugby, who's responsible for it, and what can we look forward to in the future. So this week on the channel, I've been making a series of videos sharing with you who I believe have been the rugby players of the year. I say plural because we've looked at who I thought was the rugby player forward of the year. That was Pieter, Steph, Toit. The rugby player back of the year, that was Handre, Pollard. And the rugby player of the year for substitute forward, and I chose RG Snyman for that one. And interesting to read some of your comments around that, because you've put forward some different names, and I'm certainly not going to disagree with you, because I felt that this was a very difficult one to pick, but I did give it to RG Snyman. Now in today's video, we're going to head into the last category that I've chosen, and that is the rugby player of the year for substitute back. And we're going to look at those backs that played really, really well off the bench in the Rugby World Cup. And I'm going to go through the list of nominees that I've put forward for this particular award this year. Well, if you thought the other 3 categories were difficult, I found this one to be extremely difficult. So I've put together a few names. There's not 10, but there's a few names that I think that should be considered as the substitute back who came off the bench during the Rugby World Cup and made a significant contribution to their team, but also played outstandingly well as an individual. And the first one on that list for me was Conor Murray from Ireland. And you know, he's got so much experience, hasn't he? And he came off the bench for Ireland in all those games, and you really didn't notice too much of a difference between what he was doing and what Gibson Park had been doing beforehand. And I think that consistency that Conor Murray brought to the Irish team throughout their Rugby World Cup campaign this year was very, very telling in terms of stability, experience and leadership. And that's why I've decided to put him on my list of substitute backs for Rugby Player of the Year. Next up for me is an Englishman, and I thought he played really, really well throughout the Rugby World Cup. It's halfback Danny Care that I've chosen as my next nominee. What I really liked about Danny Care when he came on was he did two major things. He sped up the game, and he was very, very quick from the base of the scrum and breakdown situation. So I felt overall he brought a lot of energy to the English team when he came on the field. And I have to be honest, I think that he should have been selected a few more times as their regular halfback, but he did a great job as a sub coming on, and I've given the nod for a nomination to Danny Care from England in my Rugby Player of the Year substitute back for this year. Throughout the Rugby World Cup, we saw a lot of the coaches using very experienced players to come off the bench and make a significant difference in their team. And I thought this was a very, very clever strategy, because some of those players may have not lasted 80 minutes against the power and athleticism that we have in World Rugby today. So by using them as strategic pawns, if you like, to come on during the game, I think that was very, very smart. And this next player that I'm going to nominate is exactly one of those players, and his name is Nicolas Sanchez from Argentina. Was very, very impressed with him, particularly against Wales. I thought he did a fantastic job. Of course, he scored that try, match-winning try. But when he came on the field, Argentina actually looked a different team. And in the early games that Argentina were playing in, they looked wayward with Carreras at number 10. And I thought Sanchez should have been in there right from the get-go. But he did come on in their later games. He really made a difference and ignited that Argentinian backline. But more importantly, got their forwards going forward as well. Okay, so moving on from Nicolas Sanchez, the next one for me on my list is from Wales, and his name is Rio Dyer. I thought Dyer has a phenomenal amount of pace and intelligence when he's on the rugby field, and he really made a difference to that Wales team when he came on as a substitute in the different games that he played in. And I just really, really like watching him play. He's able to break through the line, he's able to run around players, which is a skill in itself because of his speed. And he's pretty good in defence as well. So I've definitely put Rio Dyer on my list as a substitute back for nomination for Rugby Player of the Year. Now, there weren't too many standouts at the Rugby World Cup this year for Australia, and my next selection is a Wallaby, and his name is Nick White. I think White came on and used his experience quite well for Australia. He was always on the back foot, but he was trying to do what he could do to get that Australian team firing. And let's face it, it just wasn't the Wallabies World Cup this year, was it? They've gone away, they're going to regroup, and they've got to sort out all the problems that they have. But I think Nick White did enough in the campaign from the Australian Wallabies when he came off the bench to warrant being at least nominated for Rugby Player of the Year substitute back, and therefore I've put him on my list. Now, next up is a player who not only played as a substitute, but he also started in a couple of games, and I'm talking about the English number 10, George Ford. And of course, we won't forget that game where he scored all the points against Argentina in the pool stages of this year's Rugby World Cup. But it was with his substitution times that I thought George Ford also stood out remarkably in this Rugby World Cup. And a lot of you were talking about wanting to see Ford in there as the first pick, number 10, instead of Owen Farrell. And well, I think you warrant that remark in a lot of cases, in a lot of instances. But I think I've definitely wanted to put George Ford on here as my nominee for Outstanding Back substitute at this year's Rugby World Cup. He did more than enough to be on the list for sure. So, okay, and the last one on my list is a Kiwi, and it is the new, fresh, energised, dynamic halfback from the All Blacks, and that's Cam Royard. Can't wait to see what happens with Royard in the next selection process for the New Zealand All Blacks under Razor Robertson. I think he's going to be an outstanding number 9. He brings something totally different to Aaron Smith, and we saw that in this year's Rugby World Cup. He's a running fly half, he's big, he's powerful, he's strong. He scored some magnificent tries as a substitute in this year's Rugby World Cup, and I was thoroughly impressed with Cam Royard. In fact, I was one of the ones putting my hand up to say that this guy should be starting at number 9 in a couple of the games for the All Blacks, but unfortunately Ian Foster didn't agree with me on that, and we didn't see that happen. So Cam Royard is my last substitute back nominee for this year's Rugby Player of the Year for substitute backs. There we go, there's my list, and we'll just have a look at it again to see who I've nominated this year for the substitute backs from the World Cup that I think should be deserving of a Rugby Player of the Year. Now, my selection has been based again on the individual's performance, that he came on every time and performed at a very high level, but he also made a major contribution, I believe, on behalf of their team. And that's why I've decided to go with Danny Care as my number 1 pick for Rugby Player of the Year as a substitute back in this year's Rugby World Cup. I can't get past his amount of energy and speed that he brought to this England team when he came on the field. He played well throughout the whole tournament. He was obviously in that position where he thought he wasn't going to be at this Rugby World Cup, and he wasn't going to be selected, and here he was. He turned up and he made the most of the opportunity. I think you can't ask for much more in a rugby player than that when they get an opportunity on the world stage. So that's why I've decided Danny Care for me is the substitute back Rugby Player of the Year from this year's Rugby World Cup. I'd like to hear from you and to see what you think in terms of my selection, but also any particular substitutes and the backs that could have come on and made a bigger difference than that list that I have nominated. And would you have chosen somebody else as your substitute back of the year? Let me know in the comments. I'm really looking forward to that. So there we go, that ends this short series on Rugby Player of the Year from different positions that I have chosen. Got 3 South Africans and an Englishman making up my list this year, which is fairly interesting in itself, but we'll have to wait and see next year who gets on that list as well. As I said, I've got some really interesting interviews coming up for you this week, and we're going to be talking to a young superstar rugby player who's on the way up in the world of rugby, and his name's going to be out and about for sure in a few years' time. He's going to tell me what it's like at his age trying to get into the world of professional rugby. We're going to be talking to administrators from Rugby Canada. A director is going to join me, and we're going to talk about all things Canadian rugby, what's going on, what their aims are for 2027, and how they're expanding the game across the nation of Canada. Don't miss that one. It's going to be very, very interesting. And I've got some other interesting interviews coming up as well. So you're going to see more interviews here on my channel as I talk to people across the rugby world and get a better flavour of what's going on, how do we fix some of the problems in world rugby, and how do we educate ourselves on understanding what's going on a little bit more. I think that's really important as well. So if you want to be around for that, hit the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and I'd really, really appreciate it. So that's it, everybody, from Inside Rugby today. Thank you very much for watching my videos. I'm going to be back again really soon, as I said, with some exciting more content. So until then, stay safe, stay well, and it's time to say adios from Mexico. Bye for now.